today. Basically, we're going to be playing around with complementary pairs. And we're going to be testing out whether or not they actually do create earth tones or neutrals. So again, complementary pairs, when you look at your color wheel, is any two completely opposite colors. It could be something like red and green. It could be something like violet and yellow. It could be orange and blue. Or it could be, again, literally any color and its opposite color. Okay? So we're going to play around with the basic ones that are made up of primary and secondary colors today. As you can tell, they're noted already on the template that I gave you, okay? So we used a ruler and we recreated this template in our sketchbook. I simply measured it out. I believe it was 12 by 3 centimeters, and then I divided it as I saw them here. So there should be about 5. Actually, there should be 5 spaces in each. Just make sure that you count 5 across, because our goal is to have our 2 complementary colors here, right? And then see what color we get when we mix them half and half, okay? And then here we're going to see what it looks like if we have more of this color or more of this color in here, okay? So we're going to, at the top, note that we're playing around with complementary colors. Okay, and we can note that when we mix them, okay, I gave you guys an exemplar here that I did with paints last year, okay? When you mix complementary colors, you get neutrals, also known as earth tones, okay? So we could just put complementary colors mixed equals neutrals, okay, or earth tones, okay? Notice when you look at the one that I did, in all of the center spaces where you kind of have an equal amount of the 2 complementaries mixed, you have some version of a brown. This one here is more like an olive golden brown. Here we have like a honey brown, and then here we have like a chocolate woodsy brown, right? And then we have some interesting earthy colors on the sides, okay? So let's see what happens. We're going to go ahead and we're just going to transfer all of the labeling. So first one, we're going to play around with red and green. So red and green. And the second one, we're going to do yellow and violet. Okay. And in the last one, we're going to do orange and blue. So we are using our original paint sets. We want to be nice and respectful to them. We can squeeze paint out. We cannot funnel paint back into these tubes. So the less that comes out, the better. We can always add more to the palette as we go. Okay, and I want you to see how far a little bit of paint goes as well before you get to your final painting, just so that you learn to pace yourself with dispensing them. Okay, so we have a nice clean palette. We're going to go ahead and we're going to play around with red and green. You've got 2 reds here. Okay, we've got a brilliant red, which is more of a red-orange. And then we've got a crimson red, which I feel like is more of a primary red. So let's do the crimson one. And then we can either make a green, right? You guys now know how to mix colors to make a green. So if you really want to push yourself, you can make a dollop of green, or we can just cheat for this one because we have a green here. Mind you, when you're doing your painting, okay, I'm not going to tell you what your painting is about just yet, but when you're doing your painting in 2 days, you might notice that this green is not a good base for the green that you need in your painting. So if you need a different green, you can play around with the blues and the yellows to make the right green, okay? So just heads up. But for now, for this exercise, let's just use the red and the green that we have. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. I like to compare it to basically like my pinky nail, okay? You don't want to squeeze more than a pinky nail worth of paint out at a time. And then as I'm done with it, I like to place it back in the order just so that I don't lose the order. Okay, and then on the other side here, I'm going to do about a pinky nail of green. Again, you can always add more, but you can't save it once it's out. Okay, so in our first box here, we're going to do saturated red. And saturation, when something is fully saturated, it is 100%. It's straight out of the tube self, unaltered. So I'm just going to take my clean brush, pick up a little of the paint without any water on it, just to see the consistency of it, okay? And you'll see that it spreads really nicely. If you want to loosen it while you're doing your painting, you can mix a little bit of water onto your brush. So you're not like pouring water into your paint, you're literally just immersing really quickly. See, just boop, right into the water, and then it makes it flow a little nicer. You can stretch it a bit more. You can add a lot of water to acrylic if you want to wash, like a really, really thin, runny consistency to your paint, but that's if you want a really specific style for a particular piece of work that looks more stylistic. In which this case, we don't want to thin it down too much because we want to see the intensity of the color come through. Okay, so this side is going to be totally red. I'm going to rinse my brush. Okay, and then I'm going to dry it. Now I'm going to take some green, and I'm going to do fully saturated green on this side. When you're painting on canvas board in a couple of days, you'll notice that the paints stretch a little bit more because the canvas isn't as porous as the paper here in the sketchbook. The sketchbook paper is thick enough to hold wet medium like paint, but it still absorbs it pretty quick. That's why it kind of feels dry. But when you use this paint on canvas, it's going to feel a lot more runny. Okay? So we have fully saturated green on this side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to mix equal amounts of both till I reach what looks like a brown for the center. So I'm just going to mix them together and equal. I'm just going to go back and forth, try to use them up equally. And mix, mix, mix until I see a nice chocolate brown come through. You should, if you're using equal amounts, you should have a nice brown. If you don't have a brown, you need to add more green or more red. If it's looking too red, chances are it's the perfect shade for this block. If it's looking more green, maybe perfect for here. But if it's in the center, you should have a nice brown. Okay, so I'm gonna add just a teeny touch of water to mine, just to loosen it up a bit. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and test it, and I'm really happy with this brown that I have here. So if you think about it, brown, we just made this brown using the primary colors because the green is a product of blue and yellow, and then we have red. So really, this is just an interesting combination of the three primary colors that's giving you the brown. It's pretty wild to think about the fact that all of the colors are just different combinations of those three. Okay, so now I'm going to keep this brown because I'm going to use it for the next step, okay? So the next step is I'm going to take more red, and again, not going to squeeze out more than a pinky nail of it. And then I'm going to give myself more green here. Try not to go all over your palette because we're going to do the purple and the yellow here, and maybe the orange and the blue here. So kind of stick to one corner. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of this brown, okay, and I'm going to mix it with some more red. So what you could do is you could pick up red and just like half of it, only using half of it because the other half we want to mix with green. Mix this brown with a little red. Again, you can add like a teeny touch of water just to loosen it up a bit. So you should have like a really rustic kind of woodsy burnt red. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the other half of that brown and I'm going to mix a good amount of green into it. And then this time you should have a brown that pulls on a green undertone. I feel like I need a little bit more green. Again, you wanna make sure that they're obviously different colors. I'm gonna add a bit more green to mine because I feel like I added enough red to bring it back to the middle green. So everyone's might be a little bit different, and that's okay. The idea is you have different ratios of green to red in all of these spaces, and it's giving you a variety of browns. So maybe it looks a bit more like my exemplar. I did this with watercolor, so it's a little bit lighter because the paint is meant to be mixed in with a lot of water, so it gives it that washier look. Okay, or you can have a bit of a thicker finish to it. It's hard to tell because my colors are still wet, but you can definitely see as they dry that they're different variations of brown.